What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Vault. This is Alex Garcia, and this is my good friend Jesse Storr. Today, we're going to be talking about Joe Aesthetics, one of the famous bodybuilders in our industry who just recently passed away. We wanted to go into depth, kind of talking about his life, the impact that he's had, and some of the ideas, just the rumor mill, kind of dispelling some of that and just talking a little bit more about, what his message and his impact what we should take away from this going forward. But I'm going to let Jesse take over a little bit here and talk a little bit more about the recent situation and some just, kind of what's been going on with that.
Yeah. So what I want to do first is just talk a little bit about what actually happened and how Joe ended up dying. So Joe Linder, or as we all know him as Joe Aesthetics, he died at the age of 30 by suffering from an aneurysm, which actually ended up leading to his death. So first off, I just want to talk a little bit about what an aneurysm is, basically what the risk factors involved could be as well, and how this potentially could have ended up happening. So first of all, before we even get into that, Joe also suffered from a disorder, a myopathy called rippling muscle disease. So with that, it's similar to dystonia, where dystonia, and I don't mean to confuse it all, but dystonia, just to give you a little bit of background, is just involuntary contractions of the muscles, usually a little bit more prolonged and frequent. Rippling muscle disease, on the other hand, has a little bit more to do with sensitivity to mechanical tension or force. So what that basically means is that someone with rippling muscle disease, if they go and train or go and work out or go and do any type of move or lift or technique, whatever the case may be, that causes some type of mechanical tension within the muscles, this is what aggravates that and makes that do the way, makes those muscles kind of behave the way that they do. So that's why you saw him be able to, move his chest muscles, really freakishly, like almost like alien gains, people called it all the time. But that's what that actually does. Exactly. And all that really is pretty simple. It's a mutation in the CAV3 gene. And so that's what kind of makes that kind of happen and makes those muscles a little bit, it just basically, it's excitability, so to speak, within those muscles, because you can't efficiently contract the muscles at least, right? So it's not something that's huge. It's benign. It's not something that has a big impact in terms of like your overall health, but it's something that could have ended up leading to his death. And the reason I want to touch on that and the reason I want to draw that conclusion is because this could at least give a little bit more insight instead of just throwing around these claims saying, oh, it's because he's on gear, oh, it's because he's this and that, he's a bodybuilder. Because a lot of people, including people close to me, I got a couple of people send it to me, asking what I thought about it, and immediately people think gear. Immediately people think, oh, his organs or whatever, and that really, especially with this, was not the case. So first thing you know, heavy lifting or any type of straining can actually lead to raising the blood pressure. And that can actually end up leading to a few different things along with an aneurysm. So just being on top of your blood pressure is one thing that as bodybuilders you have to do because you're doing a lot of heavy lifting. But Joe was one of those people who was on a lot of his stuff. He was getting blood work done regularly. He was getting stuff checked regularly. He was making sure he was on top of stuff. And he even went back and regretted a lot of the stuff that he did and was trying to advise people the right way to not get on that path. And he still ended up here. So this is why I think having the right education is really important for just understanding what you're getting yourself into in terms of just training in general, but then also when you add the super subs to it as well. So first off, let's take a step back because I never really answered what an aneurysm is. What an aneurysm is when the artery walls get weak. Okay, so when the arteries get weak and they actually start to bulge, they can end up rupturing. This is what happened, at least right now, is what they're saying what happened. And so that can end up leading to some very extreme and unfortunate, circumstances, including death, which is obviously what happened here. Now, this is what the research tells us. The research tells us that strokes, in terms of myopathies, is the most frequent, right? So aneurysm is can lead to a stroke because there could be a buildup of that pressure that ends up in a rupture, and a stroke is basically when not enough blood gets to certain vital organs like the brain or things like that, right? So the reason I'm drawing this conclusion again is because these myopathies can cause extra irregularities or extra complications that can actually lead to you having a stroke or lead to what in this case obviously was an aneurysm that ended up being so bad that it did cause death. Now, any other type of stroke can be very common just in terms of being a bodybuilder in general, just again, because of thinking about the high blood pressure or high cholesterol sometimes, the extra stress on the organs, right? So, again, it's just important to keep this in mind because this could happen to you, even if you're not on gear. If Joe
Right.
wasn't on gear, there's an argument here to say that this could have happened to you if you were genetically more predisposition to this, excuse me. And the reason I bring that up as well is because Joe had an aunt who recently passed. I think it was about last year or so, maybe within the last year or two, who passed from the same thing, right? So again, something to keep in mind because I'm sure his aunt. I mean, I'm speculating here because I don't know for sure. I'm sure she wasn't on gear. So what's going to be, the response for some people? They've been trying to draw that conclusion. So again, genetics a lot of time, especially when it comes to fitness, plays a huge role. Now, real
Does.
quick, research has mainly been done in terms of actually linking myopathies and strokes specifically in that category, specifically with those two correlations. Now, having, aneurysms and myopathies have not been as distinctively researched. So there's a little bit of, I guess, of a gap there in terms of drawing those correlations or those conclusions. But I think it's worth noting the correlation between how a myopathy can actually end up leading to a stroke, especially with some of the factors that as bodybuilders or as people in the fitness industry you end up dealing with. Now, real quick before we move on, just some things in terms of how you can actually prevent it. So obviously, getting your blood pressure checked regularly, having a blood pressure
Yes.
monitor is a must. Because if you have some type of genetic predisposition to that for it being higher, or if just your lifestyle is gonna make it that way, then you have to make sure you stay on top of that. Making sure you're eating healthy foods is another big thing. Very simple, but something you can do. That's going to even go along with cholesterol as well, making sure that you're keeping the cholesterol down, getting regular physical activity. So just make sure you're moving enough, getting some cardio in as well is going to be really important. And if you smoke or if you use tobacco, cutting that out is obviously going to help as well. So those are just some things to be thinking about in terms of actually preventing this from happening to you as well, and understanding why, again, this could happen to somebody who is natural or otherwise not. Now, some key takeaways here. Again, just want to reiterate this. This happened to Joe. And yes, he was on some gear. At the time he was only on TRT, and I know Alex is going to talk about this probably a little bit more when he dives into it. But there's a lot of hearsay right now, and this is what I want to do right now with my last point. A lot of people, and I'm not even going to touch on the exact word, but a lot of people want to say that this certain vaccine could have did this as well. I've seen stuff like that. I've heard people say stuff about the gear use, obviously, and him being such low body fat percentage year round. Again, all things that are viable, so to speak, maybe. But most of it's speculation. That's the thing. A full autopsy has not been released yet. We don't know what it was. We don't know what happened. We don't know what other things could have actually ended up playing a part in this. So for people to sit here and say exactly why it happened, or even just try to act like they're the authoritative figure on this, give some respect to the dead. Joe left an amazing legacy behind, which Alex is about to get into. And he was nothing but positive to a lot of people and tried to give nothing but good information. So that's the last thing I want to say in terms of that. I hope that gave at least a little bit of understanding in terms of the science of it and how even you could end up being fall victim to this. I mean, it's something that could have happened earlier, to be honest. It could have happened 10 years down the road. I mean, there's no
Yes.
way to know, especially with an aneurysm, because it happens like that. But staying on top of some of those markers, including the blood pressure, cholesterol, making sure you actually know how your heartbeat, because even just atrial fibrillation, having a regular heartbeat is another kind of precursor, so to speak, that can end up letting you know, is there kind of a possible stroke going on, a possible aneurysm going on. Stay on top of your health. I think that's the main thing to get across here, because even for somebody who took it as serious as Joe did, something was missed there that ended up leading to his ultimate demise. But yeah, man, I want to let you take the floor now, man. You give the
Yeah.
people a
Well,
little bit more on his experience, his impact on the field, what he stood for, because I know you specifically were really following close with Joe and his journey throughout this whole thing over the past few years too.
yeah. Well, Joe was, I'll say a couple of things about Joe, in terms of, his usage. There are plenty of people throughout history who have, passed away from gear usage. You know, we have people like Rich Piana, Z's, you know, and you know, countless other people. But Joe was one of those people that, you know, it was about bodybuilding for him, but you could tell that he was all about the wellness. He moved to Thailand. I think one of the reasons why he moved to Thailand was so that he could, you know, experience a way of life that is more active, being outside, you know, just, you know, basic things that I feel like aren't necessarily like thought of as strictly bodybuilding, you know, but like he was really big on, you know, taking his mindset outside of the gym and get just like being a positive figure in fitness. And that's something that I think is really important as we look back on his life and as we look back on how he passed away. Is it doesn't matter how he passed away, you know, what it's the legacy that he's left behind. And you know, a lot of people love to make jokes about, you know, people who use gear and things like that. And to that, you know, with all of this that we just talked about with the health and you know how we want to try to prevent things like this, it's a personal choice. So you know, you have to understand that if you are going to do things like that, then you have to be prepared for things like this, you know, to possibly happen. And even though you may be in a very healthy place, you never know. You know, you never know what's going to happen, especially consider when you have genetics considered and pre-existing conditions. I mean, like we've seen things like this happen with Z's in the past. You know, he struggled more with things like rec drug use alongside the steroid usage and the, you know, testosterone. But you know, he was also one of those people that, you know, it didn't, his positivity never, it never dampened with all of that. He was like, you know, and that I think that's one thing that we have to keep in mind with all of this is that there's this pressure to try to keep up, you know, this look and staying shredded year round. Joe Aesthetics was one of those people. He stayed shredded year round. He had 8 million followers and over 500 million views on YouTube. You know, the dude was shredded all the time and making great content and videos for everyone. And you know, sure, it's not going to be like for everyone, like, but the point was that he had this unrelenting positivity. And you know, just from who, like, looking around the industry and some of my other, you know, favorite people that I love working with, like, or that I want to work with one day and like would love to see, you know, people like Noel Dezo, you know, who I had just recently started following, actually after I had met Joe, after I'd started following Joe. Me acting like I've met Joe. I wish I'd met Joe, man. I wish.
All
That was
right.
what I
Damn.
wanted to do so badly, was meet him, because he was just such an icon. Like, he was such a legend. And you know, when it comes to his impact on fitness, you know, it really saddens me that we won't get to see more videos from him, because I remember watching some of his YouTube videos and talking about how he talked about some of his struggles with, you know, like this pressure that he felt. And like, I felt like that in that way, he was so relatable and so real, even though like, you know, we live in a world, you know, with social media, you know, you always want to post pictures to get likes and things like that, you know, despite the fact that he was one of those people that, yeah, he had to make his money off of social media and things like that. He never stopped working. He was about to go and get his pro card. You know, he had just placed second at his most recent show. The dude is just an absolute uh, role model. You know, just somebody who we you know, should all aspire to be. And I don't think that his death should ever take away from, you know, what he was trying to do and what he was trying to be, and really just how he inspired and motivated everyone. You know, like, I'm just thankful that, like, I got to watch his content over the course of years. I know that, you know, just from talking to people around too, you know, he was one of those people that was just so, his reach was so far. Like, when I was posting about him and talking about it, it's like, man, I remember that guy. I've seen that. I followed that guy. Like, he's one of those people that just was a great brand for fitness. And you know, um one of the guys that is close to him, Steve, also made a video on his recent passing. So you can get a couple more details from like the situation with that, and also that video. I would recommend watching it just because it's a good reminder of like how Joe impacted people around him. Like the people closest to him will talk about him in such positive ways. And my hope is that I can one day not only aspire to have the level of physique that this man had and the level of work ethic and commitment to not just the working out, which is already challenging for most people, but the diet and the way that he went about his supplements. And there's a whole new level of risk that you take on when you're on gear. So it's not like he was one of those people that was just needlessly doing stupid things and doing rec drugs and taking gear. He did rigorous blood work and made multiple videos with more plates, more dates with Derek, and like Derek's one of those people who's quick to call people out if they're on gear, but Joe has always been honest about that. And that's another thing that I think is really important to establish with Joe about Joe and his legacy is that like he was always somebody who he always promoted telling people, like you were saying earlier, not to stay natty, to keep working on your physique and never, you never fall into that trap of thinking that you need to, or being, like that body dysmorphia, like that's real for a lot of us gym rats, and the way that he talked about it, the way that he, was so real about it, not only in his Instagram and his Snapchat, but in his long form content, he would talk more about that type of stuff. And, I just have so much respect for people like that. Those people who can be open and transparent about, what they're doing and what they're doing to make the most out of their fitness journey. And everybody's a little bit different, but, we just wanted to make this video. I personally wanted to make this video because I feel like this man had a huge impact on my life, just the way that I think about fitness, just his positivity, the way I want to go about spreading positivity through fitness. Like Joe was a role model for that. But yeah, no, and a couple of other things about him that I thought were really interesting were really just the fact that like his relationship with his parents and things like that. I always thought as I was growing up that, when I was into fitness, I needed some kind of, something to focus on, something to think about. One of the things that always helped me was realizing how many people, support you and love you. But, it's always interesting hearing other people's perspective because Joe, he talked a little bit about his relationship with his father and how his father didn't approve of things that he was doing and that he was struggling with, wanting his father's approval. And even though he'd done all of these amazing things in fitness, he was still struggling. And Joe was so resilient through a myriad of things. Like he tore his bicep for one. That was one thing that like I remember. I was like, dang, dude, that's one of my favorite bodybuilders. I don't know if he'll ever recover from that. Sure enough, there he is a few months later on the stage, like the dude had a great work ethic, great positivity, and the transparency, the honesty, and just like the overall commitment to what he was doing. He's just one of the people I will always admire forever. He's up there. He's really, for me, he's like Z's. I would say he's my Z's because Z's was just a little bit before my time. Joe was kind of one of the first people I saw, and I was like, dang, I want to be just like that man. But yeah, that's most of what I was gonna say about Joe. I feel like there's so much more that we could say about him. Obviously, he's just a legend and a real positive influence. And I think the biggest takeaway with all of this is to just, take that message that he had of being positive and never giving up on your dreams and going after things, even though things may seem really challenging. You know, he really made himself throughout this whole process. Like watching his evolution is just it's something I recommend everybody go and see. So, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
all I was really going to say about Joe, honestly.
Yeah, man. And I know you kind of touched a little bit about, you finding him and your connection with him personally. And for me, I didn't really follow him on IG or YouTube. I mean, obviously, like you said, he had almost 9 million. I think it's like between 8 to 9 million on Instagram. He had almost a million on YouTube. I mean, he was a huge figure. But no matter if I followed him or not, I saw him everywhere, right? I mean, everybody's posting his
Yeah,
stuff, everybody's talking about it, he's collabing with people. And every single time, and then the reason why he caught my attention when I first noticed him is because it was nothing but positivity, man. Like his energy was like vibrant, where it was just like I don't know, just infectious. It was like it made you want to go like do the stuff he was doing. It made you want to
work
go
out.
train. It made you want to. It wasn't like this like the usual gym culture where it's all dark and and like just like grunting and
Yeah,
blood, sweat, and tears. Like he made it seem like it's just what I love to do, and I'm gonna spread this message through my vibrant energy, and that's kind of how it felt like to me. And we talk about and for me personally, when I throw this word around a lot, like authenticity and people being genuine, and with him, I genuinely felt like that he was that authentic type of person, and he gave a lot of inspiration to people, and he was humble though above all else. It wasn't like he was an
yeah,
arrogant guy. He was very humble, and especially in this community with this or the field that we're in within fitness, even that humility is something that is far in between, and you don't see it a lot of places, especially someone of his caliber who got that many followers and with that level of a physique, right? And again, what I admire
yes,
about him the most, like one of the first like longer span videos I saw of his, is he was talking about, this is a few years ago, 2 3 years ago, I want to say, he was talking about his previous gear use and what he advised young people to do now, especially with all this information coming out, because there's 50 bodybuilders want to come out and talk about all their gear use and be all transparent because it's cool to do it nowadays, and you get clout just from
mhm,
talking about your gear use. And it can be dangerous in some situations, especially when you have kids who are just like, oh, if they were taking that, they started at this age, whatever. Yes, there's some people who will put in caveats saying, look, I don't advise you to do this, or it's not going to be the same for you.
yeah,
But what Joe did was say, and he'll do the same thing as even uh, Nick Trigili, who before he got banned on YouTube, would always say, and he was IFBB pro, saying like, look, like, yes, I abuse steroids, yes, I did other stuff, but if you can stay natural, that was his kind of thing. And again, it's to each his own. If you want to choose to go that route, you can choose to go that route. But we're in the situation now, obviously, and I'm not saying it was because of that. You see, obviously, the past few years, there's been a lot of bodybuilders who have died due to either organ failure or maybe just heart failure or heart attack. Things
and
specifically,
if they haven't died, they've had some problems. I mean, you look at people
yeah,
like
yeah.
Ron Arnold just
Um,
had a heart surgery. You know, like
mhm.
it's
So, I
prevalent.
mean, it's just something to consider. Like, yes, there's healthier ways to do it, but you have to make sure that you are working with a doctor or working with somebody who closely knows how to do those things and how to actually navigate through that. But that's basically kind of what I wanted to say in terms of how I found him, my connection with him, my perception of him. Because again, I know you know a lot more about him than I do, and we're kind of following him all this type of stuff. But I did keep up with him every now and then, and that's one thing that that never wavered. His like just genuine love for the sport, and his genuine love for other people as well. Just want everybody to, just be good, be happy, be, happy with themselves and do something that they loved as well. There's one thing that I always saw. But what I do want you to finish off with a little bit, Alex, because I think we kind of just tied it up right then. But before we hop off, is kind of give your personal like what made him stand out the most to you, and you might have already answered this. I just want to kind of have you fine tune that a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit, and then if you will
just
after that, just kind of go into his legacy and what he's actually leaving behind, like his main message you think that will always stick around no matter what.
yeah. So Joe Aesthetics, bro. He'll always be known as Braza to me, bro. Like the way he said "bruh," he said it just rolled off his
I
tongue.
know.
Like I think that's one thing
Iconic.
I'll always say. I'll always say "braza" or "brah." Or you got to get the gains, bruh. And like just everything he said in his German accent, bro. Like I will
Yeah.
always have Joe Aesthetics impression. Like the dude was just a. Not only was he genuine, but he was honestly just funny too. And I think that more people will look at fitness now as like a fun place, like
It
a
was
place
unique.
where you can have fun and work hard and look great, and like that's what we're really trying to do is promote this stuff, and I think that Joe is just like one of the best examples of that, honestly, and
Yeah,
like just
no,
a truly just a specimen too. Like you won't see another Joe. You'll never see another Joe. Like
nah,
Joe,
he had a freaky physique,
yeah,
freaky.
he had an insanely well trained physique. Like that's what happens when you have somebody who works really hard, has good genetics, and puts those two things together, and works to apply those things and come out. And I think that's something too. Is like I looked at Joe as somebody who had a very unique physique. I didn't look at him as like, oh, he's the biggest, he's the most ginormous, swole monster like Nick, like Nick Walker. Like Nick Walker is like the mutant. The dude's freaking massive. Joe is like one of those people. He's huge, but like he's huge because he's got the aesthetics, bro. He's like one of those people that will always be in a certain realm of fitness, a legend. And obviously he had so much more to do. So I think the key thing with all of this is that moving forward, we just carry on his legacy. We go forward with it, and we just remember his impact. And honestly, like I do my workouts, I think of Ziz, bro. I think of Joe Aesthetics. I think of people. I think of people that have just spread that positivity, and I want to be that positive light too. So I try to take that same mindset with me wherever I go outside of the gym, but especially when I'm in the gym, because the gym can be a place where there's been stigma. It's been stigmatized for a long time, that it's just for a certain group of people. And I think that one of the things that like Joe really did best was making it more accessible for more types of people, no matter where you are on the earth. Just like look, he would make exercises and variations that honestly looked kind of weird sometimes, but like he also was one of those people that was thinking like that. He was thinking about those people who wanted to get into fitness, not just the people who are already in great shape. And
Hmm.
I think that's important as we go into fitness, because really, like, all the stuff that we've learned, bro, we've gotten knowledge from working with other people, with training with people, with work with the social aspect of these things, and that genuine authenticity brings more of that into your life. So I feel like if there's one thing to take away from Joe, it's that you can always do more, and you can always there's a certain level of you know like you want to be satisfied with your physique, and I think that Joe did a really good job of just you know putting his journey out there. Somebody who looks so good yet could still have little quips about how he felt. And I think that as long as we continue to take ourselves beyond where we thought we could go in his name, I think that's what he would want. So that's
Yeah.
something I think we'll wrap up with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect point to wrap up with. And I think that's really what we want to try to bring with this channel, some of the stuff we're going to be doing. Again, we're very new. This is only episode number 2. But
That's
we want to try to
episode
be we want to be as authentic as possible. And we thought this was a perfect second episode. It wasn't planned, obviously, but we thought definitely we wanted to pay our respects to Joe Linder and what he's actually
2. Yeah.
done for the community, especially given that we're, really starting to get on this journey ourselves anyway. So, well, with that being said, I think that's a wrap for today. I'm gonna leave in the comments our TikTok and Instagram. We're gonna be adding to that soon. We'll take some clips from our longer YouTube videos and we'll drop them down there as well. But that's gonna be, and I'll put it in the description. It's gonna be the Vault Podcast official for both TikTok and Instagram. That's our YouTube handle as well, as you can see. But go ahead and subscribe. Again, comment, send to friends, like, whatever. We're trying to
Yeah.
grow this as
Share,
much as we
share,
can,
share, share.
please, because we want to, that's going to give us a lot more engagement as well, and that's going to be able to give us a better opportunity to bring you guys more content, better content, because we are trying to improve this process as we go. So it's a learning process as we go, but we appreciate you being patient. If there's nothing else you want to add, Alex.
Well, I would say main thing is, like, let's go get these gains, bro.
Get these games. What'd you say last
Yes,
time? Eat your
sir.
protein.
That's right. Eat
That's
your
gonna be that's
protein.
gonna be the
Oh,
sign out
man.
every time.
Yes,
Eat
sir. Eat
your
your protein.
mother protein. All right.
Protein, baby.
Eat your
Yeah.
protein. All
All
right.
right.
We'll be back next week with another one. I don't know what we're gonna do yet, but again, as always, like I said in the first video, if there are any topics you want us to cover, put it down in the comments. That'll give us an idea of what at least the viewers are wanting, and yeah, and hopefully we can make that happen. So until next time, I see you next week, my brother.
All right, my brother. Peace.